Is it possible to truly know the heart of another, especially when that heart beats in rhythm with your own bloodline? Can the lines of family, meant to define and protect, sometimes blur into shadows where desires both forbidden and undeniable take root? I grew up believing in the simple, comforting truths of family and home, but life, as it often does, had a far more intricate and unsettling story waiting to unfold. My name is Ava Brown, and the scent of salt air and blooming jasmine is the ingrained aroma of my childhood. The small coastal town in California where I spent my formative years was the kind of place where front doors were often left unlocked, and the loudest sound after dusk was the gentle crashing of waves against the shore. Everyone knew everyone. Mrs. Gable down the street always had extra cookies for the neighborhood kids, and Mr. Henderson, the old fisherman, could tell you the weather just by looking at the sky. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was rich in a different way, rich in familiarity, in shared histories, in the unspoken understanding that you were never truly alone. Our family home, a modest two-story house with a sun-drenched porch and a riotous rose garden, was the epicenter of this peaceful world. My parents, salt-of-the-earth people with calloused hands and kind eyes, worked tirelessly to provide for us. My father, a carpenter, built things with his hands, tangible expressions of care and labor, while my mother poured her love into our home, making it a haven of warmth and laughter. Money was never plentiful, but love always was. And then there was Elijah, my brother, my protector, my first friend. 3 years older, Elijah was a constant presence, a comforting shadow in my young life. From scraped knees to playground bullies, Elijah was always there, a steadfast guardian with a surprisingly gentle heart beneath his sometimes gruff exterior. We were two halves of a whole, navigating childhood side by side. Arguments were rare, disagreements fleeting, washed away by the easy camaraderie that flowed between us. He taught me how to climb the old oak tree in our backyard, his hand steadying me as I reached for higher branches, symbolizing, perhaps, the way he always encouraged me to reach beyond my perceived limits in life. He patiently explained complex math problems, his brow furrowed in concentration, his voice never betraying frustration, even when I asked the same question for the 10th time. Summers were spent building elaborate sandcastles on the beach, our laughter echoing against the rhythmic roar of the ocean. To me, Elijah was simply everything: brother, confidant, best friend. But childhood, with its innocent joys and uncomplicated affections, is always fleeting. The first crack in our idyllic world appeared when Elijah turned 18. University beckoned, a prestigious institution in a sprawling city hours away from our quiet coastal haven. The day he left was etched in my memory, the muted gray of a cloudy morning mirroring the heavy ache in my chest. The house felt instantly quieter, emptier. The familiar rhythm of our lives, once a harmonious duet, now felt like a solo, missing its counterpoint. The small garden behind the house, once a stage for our childhood games, seemed vast and lonely. Distance became a tangible thing, a heavy blanket separating us not just geographically, but also emotionally. Elijah was immersed in the demanding world of academia, a whirlwind of lectures, late-night study sessions, and new friendships. My life continued at its familiar pace in our small town, the days marked by school, friends, and the comforting routines of home. Our connection, once constant, became relegated to scheduled phone calls and hurried weekend visits. Special occasions became beacons of anticipation, moments when the distance would shrink and the familiar warmth of his presence would briefly return. Holidays transformed into cherished reunions. Each time Elijah came home, it felt like a piece of myself, missing for too long, was finally clicking back into place. The time apart, ironically, seemed to amplify the affection between us. Absence, as they say, truly did make the heart grow fonder. He always arrived bearing gifts, carefully chosen tokens of his affection, a worn copy of my favorite classic novel, a soft cashmere scarf in my favorite shade of blue, small things, perhaps, but imbued with a profound meaning, whispers of his care across the miles. The anticipation of my own departure for college grew, a bittersweet symphony of excitement and trepidation. The thought of living in the same city as Elijah, of ending the long stretches of separation, was a potent balm to the ache of leaving home. We would share moments again, create new memories, just like we had in our childhood garden. The long bus journey north was a blur of landscapes rushing by, my mind consumed by the image of Elijah waiting at the station. And then there he was, Stepping off the bus into the bustling city terminal, the sight of him was like a physical jolt. Familiar yet subtly changed, taller, broader, the boy I knew transformed into a man. As our eyes met, a surge of emotion, powerful and overwhelming, coursed through me. Ignoring my luggage, I ran, every fiber of my being propelled towards him. The world seemed to fade away, the noise of the station receding as I closed the distance between us. The moment we collided, it was like the years of separation dissolved, the miles vanished. I threw myself into his arms, burying my face against his familiar scent of sandalwood and rain. The hug was tight, encompassing, and for a blissful moment, I was simply home again. His chuckle rumbled against my ear, a sound so familiar, yet deeper, resonating with a newfound maturity. "Lily," he murmured, using the childhood nickname only he was allowed to use. "You're all grown up, but still such a child." His words were teasing, affectionate, but in that moment, age, time, everything faded into insignificance. All that mattered was the solid, comforting presence of my brother. Elijah took charge, effortlessly navigating the crowded station, my luggage trailing behind him. The city streets were a sensory overload, a stark contrast to the peaceful quiet of my hometown towering buildings, a cacophony of sounds, a rush of unfamiliar faces. But with Elijah beside me, the unfamiliarity felt less daunting, almost exciting. He filled me in on his life, the rhythm of the city, the nuances of university life, his words painting a vivid picture of his world. His confidence was palpable, a quiet strength that radiated outwards, making me feel secure and oddly proud. His room in the boarding house was small, functional, but meticulously organized, a reflection of his thoughtful nature. Everything was in its place, from the neatly stacked books on the shelf to the precisely aligned pens on his desk. It was simple, yet it felt welcoming, as if he had prepared it, not just for himself, but with the anticipation of my arrival in mind. The idea of living together was presented as a practical arrangement, a brotherly support system in a new, overwhelming environment. For me, it was more than just convenience, it was a lifeline. Entering university, facing a world of unknown challenges, having Elijah by my side felt like having a compass in a storm. With him, I felt invincible, sheltered, safe. But life, in its infinite complexity, rarely unfolds as neatly as we plan. The initial weeks were a blissful recreation of our childhood closeness. We walked to classes together, ate meals together, shared stories and laughter, recreating the comfortable rhythms of our home life. Our parents were overjoyed, imagining us as pillars of support for each other, a comforting thought for them miles away. However, as days turned into weeks, a subtle shift began to occur, an almost imperceptible change in the atmosphere between us. The comfortable familiarity, the easy camaraderie, began to be tinged with something else, a new layer of awareness, a silent undercurrent that flowed beneath the surface of our brotherly affection. The moments of sitting side by side, the accidental brushes of hands, the prolonged eye contact, these moments, once commonplace, now sparked a strange, unfamiliar heat within me. The easy affection, the familial warmth, started to carry an unexpected weight, an unsettling ambiguity. It was subtle at first, a fleeting thought, a momentary flutter in my chest. But like a persistent weed, it began to take root, to grow, to spread its tendrils through the familiar garden of my heart. I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it as the stress of a new environment, the emotional upheaval of leaving home. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. Living in such close proximity, sharing so much of our lives, the easy boundaries of brotherhood seemed to soften, to blur. Confusion became my constant companion, a swirling vortex of emotions I couldn't quite name, couldn't quite understand. A silent battle waged within me, between the comforting familiarity of my brotherly love and this unsettling, burgeoning desire. And it wasn't just me. I started to perceive a similar unease in Elijah, a mirroring of my own internal conflict. A fleeting glance held a beat too long, a touch lingered just a fraction too much, a subtle shift in his voice when he spoke my name. He was my brother, yes, but he was also a man, a grown man, and the close quarters, the shared living space, the constant presence of his sister seemed to be stirring something within him too. The unspoken tension between us grew, thick and heavy, a silent language spoken in glances and hesitations. The line between brotherly affection and something more, became increasingly indistinct, a hazy border in the landscape of our relationship. I tried to ignore it, to push it down, to convince myself it was all in my head. A misinterpretation of brotherly love heightened by circumstance. But the spiral of emotions, of guilt, of forbidden longing, was tightening its grip, drawing us both into its dizzying center. One evening, after a quiet dinner punctuated by more silences than words, I retreated to my side of the room, the unspoken tension hanging heavy in the air. Sleep was elusive, my mind a restless sea of conflicting emotions. Sometime in the dead of night, a soft sound stirred me. Opening my eyes, I saw Elijah sitting up in his bed, bathed in the pale moonlight filtering through the window, his silhouette stark against the darkness. He was awake, silent, his posture radiating an unnerving stillness. "Elijah," I whispered, my voice raspy with sleep, laced with a growing unease. "What's wrong?" He turned slowly, his gaze finding mine in the dim light. For a long moment he simply looked at me, his eyes shadowed, unreadable. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken emotions, he rose and walked towards me, his steps soft on the carpeted floor. He sat down on the edge of my bed, his proximity sending a jolt of awareness through me. "I don't know," he said, his voice low, husky, barely above a whisper. "It's just, I feel something very strange between us, Lily." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely audible, a mixture of dread and anticipation swirling within me. He was silent again, his gaze fixed on me, searching, intense. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and took my hand. His touch was warm, tentative, yet electrifying, sending shivers down my spine. It wasn't the casual, brotherly touch I was accustomed to. This was different. Charged. Alive. Have you never felt a special connection between us?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes searching mine, filled with a vulnerability I had never seen before. My breath caught in my throat. My hand, held captive in his, felt suddenly hypersensitive, every nerve ending tingling. "Elijah," I started, my voice trembling slightly. I don't know, but we shouldn't?" I tried to inject firmness into my voice, to pull back from the precipice we were teetering on, but the words felt weak, unconvincing, even to my own ears. I couldn't deny the truth that resonated in his question, the echo of my own confused feelings. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a plea, with a desperate yearning. "I understand," he whispered, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand, a small, intimate gesture that spoke volumes. "But whenever I'm with you, Lily, I can't help but feel this." His grip tightened slightly, his gaze unwavering, locking onto mine. "Haven't you ever felt this? Even just a little?" The question hung in the silence, demanding an honest answer I wasn't sure I was ready to give, even to myself. He waited, his eyes searching mine, and in that shared gaze, in the intimacy of that moment, the truth, undeniable and terrifying, began to dawn. I couldn't answer. Words failed me, lost in the chaotic storm of emotions raging within me. But in the silence, in the breathless anticipation, the unspoken answer hung heavy in the air between us. "Elijah," I finally managed, my voice barely a breath. Maybe this isn't supposed to be." Tears pricked at my eyes, a confusing mix of guilt and longing. But even as I spoke the words of denial, I didn't break eye contact. I couldn't. Something held me captive, a force stronger than reason, stronger than morality. "But I can't deny this feeling, Lily," he countered softly, a faint smile touching his lips, a sad, knowing smile. "Me neither." His eyes softened, filled with a tenderness that melted away all my carefully constructed defenses. Sometimes I wonder if these feelings have been there all along. We just never noticed, never allowed ourselves to see. And in that moment, logic, reason, right and wrong all seemed to fade away, replaced by the raw, undeniable pull of emotion. We were adrift, caught in a current too strong to resist, letting our feelings guide us into uncharted waters. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken desires, with forbidden longings. In the stillness of the night, under the pale glow of the moon, we found ourselves in a profound, terrifyingly beautiful moment of synchronicity, two souls who had always been intertwined, finally acknowledging a connection that defied definition, that shattered the boundaries of siblinghood. That night, in the hushed intimacy of our shared room, boundaries blurred, lines dissolved. We crossed a threshold, ventured into a territory both intoxicating and dangerous. When the first rays of dawn painted the sky with streaks of pale pink and gold, we awoke to a changed world, a relationship irrevocably altered. What had begun as innocent affection had morphed into something complex, something forbidden. The comfortable familiarity of brother and sister had been overlaid with a layer of undeniable, complicated desire. The days that followed were a delicate dance of unspoken understanding and carefully maintained normalcy. We moved through our routines, classes, meals, conversations, but the undercurrent of that night, the unspoken acknowledgement of our shared feelings, was always present, a silent hum beneath the surface of our interactions. Whenever we could, we stole moments of privacy, hushed conversations in the quiet corners of the library, lingering glances across a crowded room, shared silences that spoke volumes. We explored this new, uncharted territory of our relationship, a space both thrilling and terrifying, cherishing these stolen moments of intimacy, of shared understanding. The connection between us deepened, intensified, blurring the lines of siblinghood further with each passing day. It became increasingly undeniable. The boundaries had irrevocably shifted. For the next year, we navigated this precarious path, our secret carefully guarded, hidden beneath a veneer of brotherly normalcy. No one in our family, none of our friends, seemed to suspect anything amiss. But as Elijah's graduation approached, the unspoken began to loom large again, casting a shadow over our fragile equilibrium. He accepted a job offer far away, a prestigious position in another state. Distance, once again, threatened to become a defining factor in our lives. The thought of separation, after this year of intense, forbidden intimacy, was a chilling prospect. The impending geographical distance served to amplify, not diminish, the intensity of our feelings. Every moment together became precious, tinged with the bittersweet awareness of its impending end. Life relentlessly moved forward. By the time I entered my second year of college, the inevitable shift began to occur. I met Henry. He was different, older, grounded, a steady presence in the swirling currents of my life. Meeting him was like stepping onto solid ground after a long, turbulent voyage at sea. Through Henry, I began to see the complicated, unsustainable nature of my relationship with Elijah with newfound clarity. The realization dawned, slowly but surely, that the path we were on was not a viable future. The intensity, the forbidden thrill, the intoxicating secrecy, it was all built on a foundation of shifting sands, unsustainable in the long run. The attachment to Elijah, no matter how profound, had to eventually end. Henry was 26, a young businessman with a quiet confidence and an easy charm. He exuded an aura of stability, of competence, of a life well managed and thoughtfully constructed. We met at a business conference I attended with some friends. He was the keynote speaker, and from the moment he stepped onto the stage I was captivated. Not just by his words, intelligent and insightful, but by his presence, his calm demeanor, the way he commanded the room with effortless grace. After the seminar, a chance encounter in the lobby, a polite apology for a near collision, and a conversation sparked, flowing as easily as if we were old acquaintances. He started appearing in my life, subtly at first, then with increasing frequency and purpose. Dinners, walks in the park, shared interests in art and literature, a comfortable, easy courtship unfolded. Even though the lingering embers of my feelings for Elijah still flickered, Henry's presence became increasingly significant, increasingly meaningful. He offered a different kind of love, a love rooted in stability, security, and a shared vision for the future, things I realized, perhaps subconsciously, I had always craved. We talked about dreams, ambitions, life goals. Henry painted a picture of a future, not just fulfilling but also safe. As time passed, as our relationship deepened, the realization solidified. Henry was the person I could envision spending my life with. And conversely, with a painful clarity, I understood that the relationship with Elijah, while intense, while undeniably special, was a path leading nowhere, a beautiful but ultimately destructive detour. The forbidden nature of it, the constant secrecy, the inherent instability, it was all too complicated, too fraught with unspoken anxieties and ethical dilemmas. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I needed to let go, to move on, to choose a different future. A future with Henry. A future that promised happiness and a steady, grounded love. Facing this reality was painful, like severing a deeply rooted part of myself. But the decision was made. The emotional ties that had bound Elijah and me for so long, in ways both beautiful and destructive, needed to be severed. One afternoon, when Elijah came home for a brief holiday visit, I knew the time had come. The weight of the unspoken hung heavy in the air between us, a familiar tension that now felt unbearable. I sought him out, found him in the garden, amidst the roses of our childhood, the very roses that had witnessed so much of our shared history. I sat down beside him on the old wooden bench, the silence stretching, thick with unspoken emotions. Taking a deep breath, I began, my voice trembling slightly but determined. I spoke of Henry, of the love I felt for him, of the future I envisioned building with him. I spoke of my realization, my understanding that our relationship, however unique, however intense, shouldn't continue. Elijah listened in silence, his gaze distant, his expression unreadable. There was a sadness in his eyes, a deep, profound melancholy, but no anger, no resentment. He seemed to have anticipated this moment, to have known perhaps on some level that this day would come. When I finished, the silence stretched again, long and heavy. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. A small, quiet nod of acceptance. Agreement. Understanding. Neither of us said much more. Words seemed inadequate, insufficient to capture the weight of what we were acknowledging, what we were letting go. But in that shared silence, in that quiet garden, under the watchful gaze of the roses, we both understood. It was time. Time to return to our proper roles. Time to let go of the forbidden, and step back into the familiar, comfortable, and ultimately necessary boundaries of brotherhood. The relief when it finally came was profound, washing over me in a wave, even amidst the lingering ache of loss. We had made the right decision, the difficult decision. From then on, a new, carefully constructed normalcy settled between us. We gradually retreated back into the expected roles of brother and sister. On the surface, everything became easier, lighter. The unspoken tension receded, replaced by a carefully maintained distance. No more stolen moments, no more lingering touches, no more hushed confessions. We talked about trivial things, shared polite smiles, kept our conversations light, superficial. Family dinners became less fraught, casual conversations in the living room resumed, the invisible barrier between us subtly, almost imperceptibly, hardening. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, something remained. A ghost of the past, a shadow that lingered in the corners of my heart. Even as we settled back into the rhythms of brotherly affection, an indescribable ache persisted. Every accidental glance, every fleeting moment of eye contact, still sparked a flicker of something. Confusion, regret, longing. It was as if, despite the conscious decision to end it, the emotional connection, the deep, intertwined feeling, had never truly dissipated. I told myself I had moved on, that our relationship was back where it should be, that everything was right again. But in the quiet moments, in the stillness of the night, the truth whispered back. The feeling had never truly subsided. Peaceful on the surface, yes. But inside, the complex emotions, the haunting echoes of what had been, still swirled unresolved, a quiet torment beneath the carefully constructed facade of normalcy. Not long after graduation, Henry proposed. Our wedding, a joyous occasion blessed by family and friends, marked the beginning of a new chapter. Elijah was there, standing silently in the background, a polite smile on his face, offering congratulations, fulfilling his brotherly role with practiced ease. I walked towards a new future, hand in hand with Henry, the man I loved, the man I trusted, the man who promised a stable, secure, and normal life. My life with Henry unfolded in a predictable, comforting way. We built a home, planned for the future, talked about children. The chaotic intensity of the past, the forbidden thrill, the emotional turbulence. It all receded, becoming a distant memory, a chapter closed. What happened with Elijah became a story I rarely revisited. A secret tucked away in the deepest recesses of my heart. A lesson learned, a path not taken. I told myself, convinced myself that I had made the right choice. That stepping away from that complicated entanglement, choosing Henry, choosing stability, was the path to true happiness. Through it all, through the turmoil and the difficult decisions, I had learned invaluable lessons. I had confronted mistakes, faced uncomfortable truths, and ultimately grown. The experience taught me about emotional boundaries, about the importance of moral values, about the inherent dangers of succumbing to forbidden desires, no matter how compelling they might seem. Life, I realized, sometimes leads us down paths that are tempting, alluring, but ultimately destructive. The true test lies in recognizing when to stop, when to turn back, when to choose the harder, but ultimately more fulfilling path. Henry became a catalyst for this change, a guiding light, helping me understand the true value of a relationship built on sincerity, respect, and lasting, unwavering love. Thanks to him, I learned that not all emotions should be acted upon, that sometimes letting go, walking away, is the bravest and most necessary path to peace. Looking back, the story of Elijah and me remains an indelible mark, a complex thread woven into the tapestry of my life. It is a reminder of the intricate, often confusing landscape of human emotions, the delicate balance between love, desire, and duty. We moved on, Elijah and I, each in our own way. We never spoke of that time, that forbidden connection, and in the quiet understanding between us, we both acknowledged that that chapter was closed forever. But the echoes of those intense feelings, the haunting beauty of that forbidden connection, will always remain, a silent testament to the intricate, unpredictable, and sometimes heartbreaking complexities of the human heart. What happens next? Can Ava truly leave the past behind? Is true peace possible when the echoes of forbidden love still resonate? Will Elijah reappear, disrupting the carefully constructed normalcy of her life with Henry? Let me know in the comments if you want to hear part 2. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.